Thank you, Ryan, for finally acknowledging me as your son. I don't know who sent you that message. Message by the Ricardo Barrel. I think Ryan's been doing very well as for his first yarn MC. Pause for laughter. That was good. I thought of that on the bus. I've had two sort of moments of like what I'd call complete clarity in my life, where I could kind of see things end to end. And I could see where I'd come from, and I could see where I was going. Not long ago I dropped my phone in the toilet. It sort of slipped out of my hand, and for like just a moment I could sort of see the steps I'd taken up until this point. And there were like two possible futures for this. There was this one future in which my phone was irreparable. There we go. Irreparably broken and covered in shit. And there was a second future in which it was fine and it was covered in shit. And in that moment when I realized that that's what I had, I made peace with God. And it bounced off my thigh and it landed in the toilet. And it's fine. This was 4 months ago, and I'm 4 months with a working phone, and I'm really proud of that. The other time there was no calmness and there was no no forgiveness. I was in Adelaide on the street at the front of the State Library there. And has anyone ever been to Adelaide? Oh. It's not the kind of place that you want to have a panic attack. I was in more physical pain than I'd ever been in my life. I was riddled with athlete's foot. I had a chest infection, and I was poor beyond words. For maybe the first time in my life, I was destitute. Instead of sort of coming to terms with this and making peace with God, I went to a pancake parlor, and I spent the remaining money I had there eating pancakes until they asked me to leave, which didn't actually take a very long time. The way I'd gone to Adelaide was I booked a voyage, a tall ship voyage on a Dutch tall ship. I thought it was a very romantic thing to do. It's why I was in the most physical pain in my life. It's why I had athlete's foot, because Dutch people don't wash their feet. It's why I hadn't seen any loved ones for about a month. It's why I had no money. I'd had sort of a listless year of just letting everybody down in my life, and I had no idea what I was doing with my future. And so I thought the best thing I could do was spend every godly cent I had and had ever made on this trip, on this 100-year-old ship that was travelling from South Africa first to Perth, and then from Perth to Adelaide to Melbourne, and then on to God knows where. I had somehow contracted the worst case of tinea in this whole experience, and I tried to sort of swallow that and not pay any attention to it whatsoever, but it was really fucking me up so badly. I wanted an experience that you're promised from when you're very, very young. I wanted to be able to stand on the stage like tonight and sort of talk about how the sea looks and how albatrosses look and how the moon looks over the sea and how Dutch people talk. And I know how they talk, and I like the word poof a lot when they're referring to you. Like me specifically. I don't think I didn't even say that word to anybody else. There's two reasons why it's not that story though. One, because talking about sailing is the most inexcusably boring thing that you could ever do, even if you enjoy doing it. I enjoy doing it, but it's fucking boring as hell. The other thing is that I guess all great memories, this kind of story resides in the peripheries of that rather than the actual event itself. The guts of it, I guess, were what I was promised. I got to see a lot of albatrosses, and I got to see the moon at night over the sea, and I got athlete's foot. When I say that I was poor beyond words, I don't really mean that as a figure of speech. It was that kind of poor that I'm sure that many of us have been in, when someone just asks you a simple question and you just go like, it was this shock. I'd never really sort of experienced this before. I'd never been in this place. It didn't help that everybody else on the boat were 50 to 100-year-old chartered accountants and public servants and self-made businessmen. These were the true citizens of the ocean. I'm not sure if there's many people who have sailed here, but that's what you get when you go there. It's not fun. There were some young people. There was a young beekeeper from New Zealand who'd never been out of his rural community on the South Island, and he had a lot of things to say about what the best race was. And it's like, it's not bees, and it's like, it's not anything except white people. He was the kind of guy who, when he heard many of the Dutch sailors talking to each other in Dutch, which seems like a reasonable thing to do, he said, well, that's just rude. There was a chef from Perth, this young guy with this really mean face, and he said to me that his culinary speciality was foraging for sea herbs, and I went, ha-ha, and laughed, and he said, what's funny? And I said, nothing, Mitch, because he had a mean face, and he said things like, I'm not here to make friends, Jack. You don't go sailing if you want to make friends. And I kind of thought, maybe Mitch isn't very good at making friends, either on the ocean or on land. There was a young physio student who had sort of gone AWOL on her exams to be here on this trip. She's a veteran, and she used to critique me when she saw me doing my stretches. I do these little sort of modest kind of like lunges and things like that, just to like limber up, because I assume that's the kind of thing you do. I wore skinny jeans the entire time. And I got a bit overzealous about her medical knowledge, and I said, why can't I breathe sometimes? And what's wrong with my skin? And she said, I need to go study for my exams. And everybody there was obviously kind of after something. Everybody wanted something. Mitch wanted to stop being a sort of a mean land guy and become a mean sea guy. And this was the same for the physio student. She wanted to just sort of make a career in the ocean. I think the beekeeper just wanted to talk. I think he just wanted to be racist in another place. And just talk about beekeeping, and he was very good at that. He was a tremendous. He was tremendously racist and tremendous apeirist. I kind of found myself though after all this relating most to all the old men there, because I knew that the thing that they wanted was to do something before they died, and I thought I was going to die there on the street in Adelaide in front of the State Library. I could see my futures then, and they were both me being dead on the street in Adelaide of all places. Of course, I didn't die. I somehow survived that episode. I called my parents for some money. This is in 1915. Sorry. I got some money from my parents, just enough so I didn't have to steal some socks from rivers. If you've ever been in a position where you're having to debate whether to steal socks from rivers, then you've never really known poverty. And we went back to sea, and I was back in that bubble that sort of everyone goes into when they travel, and everybody sort of really likes travel for. They're able to engage with this, and it's why there's so many people on Tinder whose profiles are just love travel. Well, okay, that's cool. It's because you're a boring person. It's because you're a very boring, horrible person. And so I went back to ocean, and I went back to ocean. If you've been to the sea, you'd know that that's a term. And we're back there, and we went to sea a few days. We took off most of the young people, and we brought on some more old people. Now there being these so many kind of what I thought about as characters, me being sort of ununique in that I kind of saw myself as unique in that very young white guy, aimless way, and that kind of Zach Braff bases all his protagonists. So I saw myself as the protagonist, the Zach Braff protagonist of the South Sea, and there were other young aimless men, but I saw them as the Zach Braffs of the shittier Zach Braff projects, which and then I realized they're all Zach Braff projects. I was like maybe one of the early episodes of Scrubs. But we got rid of those Zach Braffs, and I could be the Zach Braff that I always wanted to be. Once we left Adelaide, we brought on more old men, including someone who was very, very close to death. This man was 80 or 90, and I thought maybe this is the person who will teach me what I need. And I said, have you been on many voyages before? And he said, I've been on one fucking voyage for every year for the last decade. And he walked off, which took a really long time because I couldn't walk upstairs. So we eventually kind of got to Melbourne, but for me the trip didn't really end at Melbourne. It ended in a place called Port Fairy in Victoria. And I don't know if anyone's ever been to Port Fairy in Victoria, but it's like a kind of retiree's paradise, this beautiful little sleepy seaside town where everyone has a tiny house and like a gigantic yacht moored out the front of it. So they can only afford the dream of having the yacht but not the actual house. But what I didn't realise at the time, and I realised this afterwards, was that I'd been here before when I was young and travelling around, and maybe it was the affinity that I felt for this place without realising. But I didn't feel the same way that I was in Adelaide. I felt like I was still in the bubble. And with the money that I still had from my parents that sent me for socks so I didn't become a felon, we went to the pub. We landed and we went to this pub. I went with these old men and we drank. And I think because of the place that I was at that point, I drank a lot. And I spent all that money. And I borrowed some money and I kept drinking. And eventually it got very late and Port Fairy becomes very dark and very, very small. There's one or two pubs at most, and there's no light anywhere. And I convinced two people to stay and not go back to the ship that night for dinner. I said, someone's going to come pick us up. We just need to call them, and they'll come pick us up later. Have dinner with me. Let's get drunk. And I got two people to stay with me. I got a meteorologist from England to stay with me, and I got a public servant in water regulation from Fremantle to stay with me. And so I kind of thought, well, these guys are my two best friends from here on in. And we went to a pub and we kept drinking, and we realised that we actually had way more time than we knew what to do with. And I wanted to get that kind of drunk, and I did get that kind of drunk where you want to tell a stranger all your secrets. And I thought we all wanted to do that. And so I talked to them a lot. I talked to them about sort of where I was up to that point. I talked about that anxiety and having no money. And I sort of felt like I bared my soul to them more than I had to anybody else for a very long time. And then I waited for Nick, the public servant, to sort of start up, and he nodded. He looked at me and he said, "They do a great Parmigiana deal here on Tuesdays." And I said, "What have I done? Where am I? What's going on here?" And he said, "Look, you can't go on these voyages without being in one of two places. You can either be running away from something that is impossible to run away from, or you can be searching for something that's impossible to find." And this guy was one of those other people who had been on one fucking voyage every year for the last decade, and so I believed him for the first time. And I was thinking about this as we left that pub, because we realised that it was close to midnight and we hadn't heard from the ship, and we walked down. I was thinking about this as we walked down the canal in the darkness, out of any kind of light there was. We walked past the gigantic yachts that some of the businessmen were sleeping in because they obviously didn't have enough money to have both their house and their yacht, which I just thought was amazing. I thought that was great. That made me a bit happy. And I was thinking about this as we got to the point that we thought we might get picked up at, and we realised we didn't know where the boat was coming, we didn't know where it was going to land, we didn't know if they knew where we were. I didn't know if they knew we were missing or if they were going to come at all. And so I laid down on the boardwalk there, and I kind of thought about this question in that way you can do when you've been anxious for the past fortnight and you're kind of the drunkest you've been in a very long time. And I kind of tried to think of what I learned, and I don't think I learned anything, and I don't think I've learned anything since. And I would become a man who would drop his phone in the toilet and have everything sort of revealed to him at once, but I was not that man yet. And the boat would come for us, this kind of sound coming like out of the night that we didn't know where it was, we couldn't position it, but we knew that something was coming to us that was promised. And I knew that sort of in that moment all I had to do was just lie there and be someone who was riddled with tinea, just lying down in a place he'd been as a very young boy. Thanks.